Alright, so in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about the different kinds of social policies that exist to address the social inequalities we've been talking about all semester long. And this is really to help us think through both in the broader sense, what could we do to actually address inequalities? How can we go about this? And what are the actual policies that exist that have been tried as a means to create a more egalitarian society? And this is going to be particularly important for you guys to really focus in on, because you're going to, in your final paper for the semester, pick one of these 5 policy approaches that I'm going to talk about, and you're going to write your paper focused around arguing for that particular policy approach. So you need to really understand how each of these works, and of course you'll find that each of the policy approaches we talk about lines up with one of the readings that we've done for this particular unit. But first, let's talk a little bit about how it is that how to think broadly about reducing income inequality. How can we create policies that will reduce inequality? What are the broad ways that we should be thinking about accomplishing this goal? And again, we're going to go back to Eric Olin Wright's piece on this, where he lays out 3 distinctive things that we have to think about whenever we're talking about creating income inequality reducing policies. One is just to simply ask, what is the mechanism at play here? How does this policy actually work to reduce income inequalities? What is the policy lever that is actually leading to the inequality reduction that we're supposed to see from the policy? That's the mechanism. And you have to really, with any policy, you have to figure out what is the mechanism through which this policy actually works to reduce inequalities. The second thing you have to think about is the rationale for this. What is the normative foundation that this particular policy is addressing? Are we trying to expand equality of opportunity? Are we trying to reduce needless suffering? Are we trying to enhance or increase individual autonomy? What is the normative principle around which this particular policy is working? So you have to figure out what that rationale is, and then of course you want to be asking, okay, how does this mechanism actually achieve that goal, right? How does the mechanism that is reducing inequality actually expanding equality of opportunity, actually producing an increase in social solidarity? And then finally, you have to think through, what are the potential problems here? What could go wrong? What are the unintended consequences that this policy might be producing? The things that we're not thinking about, right? So if we understand the mechanism, right, this mechanism might produce a reduction of inequality, but what side effects might there be? Would it slow economic growth? Would it lower the standard of living for individuals, even while reducing the inequalities that are there? What are the unintended things that could happen from this? Right. So those are the 3 core things you need to be thinking about anytime you're looking at any policy, any specific policy, or any of the 5 broad policy approaches that we're going to be talking about. What is the mechanism? How does this policy work? What is the rationale? That is, what is the normative foundation around which this policy is addressing inequality? And what could go wrong here? Now let's get into the specific policies that exist and that have existed as a means to reduce inequalities. I'm gonna start with 2 of them. I'm gonna give you the broad outlines of each of these, and then we're gonna go into the specific approaches. The first 2 policy approaches are what we can think of as market-based policy solutions, and we think of these as market-based policy solutions because the goal is to target particular market outcomes and adjust them in some way. That is, you're focusing in on changing or manipulating the market itself as a means to get the outcome that you're looking for. The second set of policies are what we think of as social welfare policies, and there's 2 types of these. But in both of them, what you're really trying to accomplish is using a kind of taxing and spending mechanism. You're going to tax the individuals in a society, and then you're going to take that pool of money, you're going to redistribute it to those to those that you think need it, in the case of means-tested welfare, or to the particular programs or areas that you think should be using the money. And then the final approach is what we call universal basic income. And so we'll talk more about that in just a second. Let's start with these market-based policies. Again, when we're thinking about market-based policies, we're focused in on adjusting the market in some way as to mitigate the negative effects of the market or to change the market dynamics themselves. So one version of this is to look at education and think about education as an investment in human capital. And in this sense, what you're trying to accomplish is to change the supply of labor that is out there. Remember, the fundamentals of a market are supply and demand. So if we can affect the supply of workers that are out there, enhance their skills, and enhance the human capital that they're bringing with them to the market, they will be able to be more productive workers, to get better jobs, and thereby increase their own earnings through that. So we're reducing inequality in that sense by taking those often that we think of who are in low-skilled jobs, and we're enhancing the human capital they have so that they can move up the socioeconomic ladder, and thereby bring them, in that sense, out of poverty, or at least out of those low-wage jobs. And so this is a lot of our education policy is targeted towards doing just that, right? Giving people the skills that they need to be competitive in a marketplace and enhance the earnings that they get from those skills. The second market-based approach is to think about labor market institutions, right? So if in the education policy approach we're thinking about investing in people and investing in their human capital, in the labor market institutions we're thinking about expanding the number of higher-paying jobs that are out there. Right, expanding just the pool of opportunities for individuals to capture higher wage jobs, right? And one version of this is to reinvigorate labor unions, to focus in on giving labor unions the power they need to collectively bargain, and in doing that, they will enhance the wages of those who are in those unionized jobs. Another approach would be to focus on minimum wages and raising the minimum wage. This is what the fight for $15 an hour is all about, right? What's called the fight for 15. A proposal to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. So you take those individuals who are at the bottom, who are in low-wage jobs at the bottom of the socioeconomic hierarchy, and then you pull them up by increasing the floor for their wages. And there's another version of this, which is investing in particular kinds of industries, particularly high-skilled industries. Green investments are often sort of seen this way. If you invest in green energy, this will increase the number of high-skilled jobs in that industry, thereby expanding the number of higher-paying jobs that are out there. And that's what industrial policy is all about. All right, so that's the focus on market-based kinds of policies. You want to see these, and I want you to see these as working on supply and demand, right? Education policies are affecting the supply of workers in the labor market. Labor market institutions are increasing the number of higher-paying jobs, thereby increasing the demand for those workers to utilize their higher skills, right? All right, so that's market-based policies. Let's talk a little bit about social welfare policies. There's two kinds of social welfare policies out there. The first, and again, we're thinking about ways to sort of tax and redistribute money to people. Means-tested social welfare. This is the predominant way in the U.S. that we organize our social welfare policies. In means-tested social welfare, you target the public assistance to those who are in need. And you identify where the poverty line is. You could do this in a relative way or in an absolute way that we've talked about, but you identify where the poverty line is to identify who are those that are in need, and then you focus monies on those individuals. Food stamps are targeted at those who are food insecure, those who we deem to not have enough income on their own to purchase the basic necessity of food. Housing vouchers work the same way to provide housing to those who are in need. Medicaid works that way to provide for medical insurance for those who are in need. In all of those cases, what we're doing is we're targeting a set of people, saying that if your income falls below a certain threshold, we're going to deem you to be in need, and thereby we're going to target that money towards you in the form of food stamps, housing vouchers, Medicaid, and other kinds of targeted social welfare policies. Universal social welfare policies work a little different in that they're focusing on financing basic necessities for everyone, right? So if means-tested social welfare is targeting that aid to those we deem in need, universal social welfare, the core difference is that it's targeting everyone, right? So this is what Medicare for All is all about, right? Taking Medicare and expanding it to everyone. This is universal health insurance, right? Providing health insurance for everyone. Universal higher education in some of the Nordic countries, some of the Scandinavian countries work this way, where higher education is provided to everyone. You can think about K through 12 education in this way. This is a model where everyone is provided with, through publicly financed dollars, through public financing, everyone is provided with an education from kindergarten through 12th grade. Doesn't matter what your income is, what your social background is, everyone gets access to this, and that's what makes it universal. The last policy we'll talk about is universal basic income. So what is universal basic income? This is perhaps the most novel idea that we'll talk about. And you heard a lot of this in the recent Democratic campaign from Andrew Yang. And in a universal basic income, basically everyone is receiving a portion of society's wealth in the form of a particular check, either annually or usually monthly, that you get, and you can spend this however you wish. There are no conditions attached to this at all. Every single person, if there is a universal basic income, gets this check, right? And it's usually, the proposals that are out there for $1,000 to $1,200 a month. You get this check. It doesn't matter if you're not working. It doesn't matter if you're poor. It doesn't matter if you're rich. What your income is. Everyone gets the same amount of money, and they can spend this however they wish. So I want you to imagine, as a sort of thought experiment, that there was this thing out there called the Schmoo. And with the Schmoo, everyone, the Schmoo is this sort of little, this little guy that you see a picture of there. And the core thing about the Schmoo is that the Schmoo is self-replicating. It produces itself over and over and over, right? Constantly. And it provides for all of the basic necessities. It's not going to give you caviar, but it will give you milk and eggs and bread, right? So you get your basic needs through this thing, right? This is made popular through a cartoon in the 1940s from Al Capps. So it can provide for basically all of your necessities. And the key question is, how would your life be different if you had a Schmoo, right? Thinking of yourself right now, many of you are financing your own higher education. What would it mean for you to have a Schmoo? You could basically come and get your education while using the Schmoo to get your basic life necessities, and you wouldn't be as insecure. You wouldn't have to work your way through college, for example. So it's worth you thinking about what this Schmoo entails. Eric Olin Wright also, from what we read earlier in the semester from him, popularized this within sociology. But it's worth thinking about how your life would be different if you had a Schmoo. Now, what's the core difference between the universal basic income, or the Schmoo if you like, and social welfare and market-based solutions? Well, the key difference with market-based solutions is that, like social welfare, it's a tax and spend kind of program. So we're publicly financing this through the state. Unlike social welfare, either universal or targeted, it's not attached to a particular program. So you get to decide however it is that you want to spend this $1,200 a month each month, right? Okay, so those are the 5 basic policy approaches. Again, I want you to see human capital and labor market institutions as forming the market-based policies. And then the means-tested versus social welfare is forming the social welfare policies, and then universal basic income on its own. All right, so I want you to think about those 5 policy solutions, and I want you to think about what do you think would be best? And you're going to write your whole paper about this, and I'm going to create a little survey for you guys to take a look at, where you can sort of, again, rank order what your preferences are for this. But you really want to think through what it is, which of these you think would be the best way to go about addressing inequality, and why do you think this would be the case? All right, talk to you guys soon.